to express that truth, be able to show up as our most authentic selves, even in a world that isn't moving that way. Hi, my friends. Perspective here. In the previous episode, we spoke about vibration, polarity, rhythm, and cause and effect. So, using the simple example, we had spoken about how vibration is really just the principle that everything in life moves, everything is in constant motion. Polarity builds off of that, reminding us that everything has two polar ends, good and bad, this and that, hot and cold. The ability to see the same experience as whether having a happier outlook towards it or having a more sad outlook or having a lighter outlook or a denser outlook really tells us about polarity being extreme degrees, extreme points within the same essence. Across those extreme points, you have varying degrees of the same thing. Now, the extreme points here are the polarity. And then from polarity, we move to rhythm. Rhythm puts together the concepts vibration and polarity, telling us that a rhythm exists because there is a vibration from one polar end of the same thing to the other polar end of the thing. And that's why we talk about seasons, how we could go from summer to fall, fall to winter, like that. So it goes from one end to the other end, and then there is a rhythm that we experience in life. And the whole point of this is to remind us that yes, there's a rhythm that life goes with, but we could also have our own rhythm to determine where we want to fix our polarity at, how we choose to perceive the same thing from different ends. And then finally, we talk about cause and effect. Cause and effect introduces that within the context of rhythm that vibrates from one end of polarity to the other, there is cause and effect. I use the example of water and how the temperature of water changes, and essentially what happens for the temperature to change from hot or cold, which are in this sense the polar ends of water. When we're measuring the temperature of water, it's the same water, it just has varying degrees from hot or cold for us to then say, oh, this is cold water or hot water. But what's happening behind the scenes, what is the cause of this said effect, which is the temperature, is the vibratory motion of the particles of water. So here we see that vibration is the cause, and the temperature, which are again the varying degrees, the rhythm of the temperature is the effect. Now, in this case, we create a parallel between vibration and cause and effect such that we're able to change the effect that we hope to see. Say, for instance, we have one experience. Instead of having that experience having a negative effect on us, we could change it and have that experience give us a positive effect once we're able to go back to the cause of the emotion. Why do we even feel the way we feel about this experience? And we spoke about the multiple planes and how the mental plane is a cause and the emotional plane becomes the effect, because that's what happens behind the scenes. If we're able to change the thoughts that we have towards something, if we're able to change our belief systems, which are deeply rooted in our subconscious about that thing, then we have successfully caused the effect of happiness, right? If we're having happier thoughts, if we're able to see the benefits of that thing and have unconditional love to that thing, then of course it suddenly tweaks the entire effect, because now we have this on a higher vibration versus having it on a denser vibration of our mind. And the higher vibration of our mind just points towards the more liberating, freer thoughts, happier thoughts of unconditional love. And the denser one would be like the shameful thoughts or thoughts about rejection, thoughts about scarcity, thoughts about fear, lower themes of consciousness. We're able to bring all these concepts together, the vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, to transmutation. We're exploring how transmutation is just being able to go from one polar end to the other polar end that we choose, regardless of how life moves. Don't see it from one way alone. You see it as a well-rounded view. Before, you saw something as, oh, if it's not a favorable circumstance or outcome as I expected it, then I must not like it. Then that's conditional. So how do you move through the world if it's conditional, and most of the times things don't go the way we want it? So now we get these tools and we are able to expand our minds. We're no longer limited to just one way of seeing it or just one end. And if life moves towards one end, we can observe that there is another end to see it from, and see what is the sweetest point for us within those varying degrees. What is your sweet spot? What is your truth? Understanding your truth comes from different, like I said, experiments in the lab that is life. You run multiple experiments with your life, you observe things, you observe how you feel about them. Sometimes it works, some other times, as you evolve, it no longer works, it no longer fits. And now you have to find your sweet spot again. So that's very helpful for sure. I also wanted to say that cause and effect, as I have just described it, has been pretty much cause being on the higher plane and then effect being on the lower plane, right? It doesn't always have to be that way. I'm describing it this way because when I'm bringing polarity and rhythm, as in the poles and how there's that swing across, when I'm bringing polarity and vibration, as in varying degrees across the polarity, as in there's a vibration of varying degrees across the polarity, then there is a need to talk about cause and effect, as a cause being on a higher plane and effect being on a lower plane, right? Because then when you want to bring all of these together to discuss the transmutation or transformation, you can only transform from a higher plane. So I said it this way so that you're able to bring polarity, rhythm, vibration, cause and effect all together via transmutation. Cause and effect doesn't necessarily have to be across a higher plane to a lower plane, as in higher plane being the cause, lower plane being the effect. Cause and effect can come as in on the same plane. A good example would be when someone is in a mood, you kind of pick up on that mood. So essentially, the emotion that they have going on can rub off on you. And that's even why we say people who you're closely connected to in your relationships, people who you've been in triggering circumstances, people who have perpetrated action from a place of wounding, who are connected to this identity of wounding and all of that in your subconscious. It's easy for them to trigger this emotion in you by them just embodying that emotion. And so in that case, cause and effect could occur on the same plane. Say for instance, on the mental plane, which is the thoughts, you could have a thought that leads to another thought. So your mind has associated two different things that are similar for some reason to you. And by thinking of one thing, it triggers the thought of the other thing. In that case, the cause being the first thought and the effect being the second thought. But those two are thoughts, they are on the mental plane. In a case, a thought could trigger an emotion. That thought would be the cause, and the emotion would become the effect. Cause and effect is happening on a different plane. And that's truly the only way that transmutation can occur. Transmutation cannot occur on the same plane. You cannot try to convert, an emotion that someone has passed on to you to a positive emotion by just trying to be happy. No, you have to zoom into what is causing the unhappiness, observe that closely, and then tweak it based off your own journey, because again, everyone is on their own different journey, and until you actively are aware of your patterns, until you start excavating your patterns, you can't really tweak, you can't really see the effect that you desire. And the effect is only going to be to a certain degree. Again, polarity is two polar ends with varying degrees across. It's only going to be to a certain degree, right? And the more you strengthen your awareness of self, your concept of self, solidify those thoughts with actions, and keep repeating that to reprogram yourself, the more the degree that you're tilting towards in the higher vibration or the lower vibration, or the more liberating thoughts and the lower thoughts. But all of that to say, transmutation truly occurs across the different planes. However, it has to be within the same context. So you cannot transmute from one circumstance to another circumstance, except those circumstances are closely related, except there is an underlying thread that correlates them. You can't necessarily go from one thing to the other thing. And to be as effective as possible in transmutation, then you already have your hands full with one thing. So yes, within the same context, gets the job done. You want to ensure that, okay, yeah, we're focusing on this circumstance, and we're not trying to transmute from poverty to freedom, right? Yes, being abundant could give you a level of freedom, but again, you just have to be as aware as possible and as specific as possible. We're able to bring all these concepts together: the vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, to transmutation, and reminding us that we have the power to choose. And once we choose, the thoughts that we allow or give permission to fester in our minds, we are accountable for those thoughts. And as we are aware of those thoughts, as we actively choose those thoughts, to either keep being in that headspace or to choose being somewhere else and a freer, higher vibrational thought, that would directly affect the emotions and how we feel about that experience. Cause and effect, transmutation, all points to action. Everything has to end as an action. That's the whole gist. But you do realize that at the end of the day, it's like a loop. Because after acting out, that action reinforces your belief system, that solidifies it. So even the thought itself doesn't end up until it's an action. And because of the very action, it loops back into a belief system, a stronger belief system. But all that to say, it's more of a cycle than it is, like a forward flow. It's just like a cycle of life, and you keep coming back and coming back and coming back.